Let's transform this 12-inch MDF round board into this, shall we? Hi there, my name's Carolyn Dunn and I'm a dot mandala artist, and I would love to welcome you to my channel. Let's get started with our color palette for Arizona Vibes. The base coat is in Buttermilk, and the rest of the color palette will be in the description box. I've primed this piece because we're going in with a light color. We're using Buttermilk from Deco Art Americana, and I'll give it 3 coats. Now when I first rolled this on, it was quite bubbly, so I ended up going in with a paintbrush afterwards and just brushing that out. The other 2 coats were fine. And this is smoothing it out quite nicely. I'm happy with that. Now I've got 3 coats front and back on this piece and on the sides. It's 12 inches in diameter, and the back has been signed and dated and varnished ×3 as well. And now I'm just orienting the top so that when it hangs, the signature on the back will be straight across. So I know I want the top of my first set of lines to be right there. So we're ready to start on the front, and we're going to lay out our guideline. I'm just using this plastic center finder that I find handy. And once I've got it lined up, I'm going to put in my center dot and the first 2 lines. And I'm just using a watercolor pencil to put in my lines. Now they're very faint, but I can see them. And now we'll draw our first 2 lines through. Now I'm using a 16 segment stencil here to get the starter lines in. If you don't have this, you can just use your protractor, and each segment is at 22.5 degrees all the way around your 360. And then we'll just carry those lines through, going right through that center. And now we'll go ahead and put in our circles at 0.5 centimeter increments. There we go. And just switching to the smaller compass to do our inner circles. There we go, we're all laid out. And now for that center dot, and we'll be using bright copper. And we're going to use the 11mm tool. And I like that. And now we'll go in with our titanium white to create our first round of dots. Using Indian turquoise, but I'm going to darken it a little bit with the desert turquoise so we have a nice range there. So I've got some Indian turquoise in there, and I'll just add some desert turquoise, not that much. I'm going to use the 2.5mm tool now, and we're going to place our next dots. There we go. And for this last row, we'll go in with the desert turquoise. Now let's place tiny little copper dots in between all of these center dots. You're just going to have to find a fine tip tool that's going to be small enough to get in between some of these tight spots and big enough to leave a dot. That's really pretty. I like that with the copper. So we're going to take the 2mm tool and just going to place a dot on the line up here. So that's our uppermost dot with the 2mm tool, and just keep them on the line. And then we'll walk some dots down the side. Let's just use the small end of the 1mm tool. Let's get some of these titanium white dots in, and we're using the 2mm tool. We're just sitting them on this line here. And the line they're sitting on is 2.5 centimeters from center. Beautiful. Let's fill these in with peacock pearl. Okay, I thought I had the camera turned on. Apparently I didn't. So for the uppermost dot, I used the 2mm tool. For the uppermost dot, and then I use the 0.5mm tool to walk those dots down. And this is in the titanium white, and I've just been going back in and over dotting some of those tiny ones down at the bottom. And we have asphaltum, Mississippi mud, and portobello. Before we start the brush strokes, I'm going to place a copper dot just above these white dots using the 2mm tool all the way around. And we're starting with this color. Okay, I'm using the XDT 2/0 for this stroke. I've taken it off the Lazy Susan so I can stabilize my hand while I'm doing brush strokes. Okay, we've added another copper dot, and I used the 2.5mm tool for that uppermost dot there. And now we'll go in with portobello. Now, let's take the purple pearl paint and we'll use our 3mm tool and place dots in between the flowers. And now we'll use the same color. We'll use our 2mm tool, and we're going to create a trio of swooshes here, and we'll use a fine tip tool to drag those swooshes down. And now we're going to go in with slate gray to create some dots at the base of those trio of swooshes. And we're using the 1mm tool.
Crying on your bedroom floor. Baby, you can take my word. You haven't gotta hurt no more. Things about to get.
Okay, 3mm tool in the titanium white. And in this row here, let me get your measurement. So 6.5 to 7 centimeters in that row there from center. We'll put in these dots. Okay, I'd like to do the same thing here in different colors and on the other side here. So we're still taking 1.5 centimeters to make our oval shapes. There we are, all the way around. Okay, we're going to put these in the bright copper. And again, they're 1.5 centimeters to here. The bottom of them is 7 centimeters from the rim. Okay, time to do our next round of swooshes with our brush strokes. So our dots here are going to be in the peacock pearl. So let's put our first dot here using the 2.5mm tool. And I think we'll start with the same as we did here. We're going to use dark first, so the desert turquoise brush stroke. And we'll start here. So our next is Indian turquoise. But first we'll put another peacock pearl dot up here with the 2.5mm tool. Are we ready with the Indian turquoise? There we are. So now we need some more peacock pearl dots. And we'll still use the 2.5mm tool. Our last swoosh will be in Whispering Turquoise. All right, Whispering Turquoise. use, I think, the 1mm tool to create some top dots in the Dazzling Metallics Peacock Pearl. Lovely. I really like that. So I used the 2.5mm tool, and now I'm just using the small end of that tool to drag that down all the way to the bottom. And again, look at the distance in between. I mean, theoretically, yes, we should be on the line, but if you're shifted a little, it's a little more pleasing to the eye if you're in between these two. Let's create some dots around that and possibly some swooshes. We're going to start with dried clay. So we'll go above with the large end of the 0.5mm tool, and then we're going to walk dots down with the small end. Now we're going to take our peacock pearl and we're going to fill in these areas in between here. So almost like little triangular shapes, and just follow the line of the circle. Now we'll put in some alternating swooshes using purple pearl, and then we'll come in with the peacock pearl and the 0.5mm tool. Now we'll do a little top dotting with the peacock pearl, and we're just putting that on top of these purple dots here and using the 0.5mm tool. And hey, while we've got that paint out, let's top dot these little slate gray guys, and we'll use the small end of the 0.5mm tool to do that. There we go. And now we're going to take some of that purple pearl to top dot these peacock pearl dots. We're using the 0.5mm tool. Use whichever end works best for you to get a nice dot in there where you can still see the underlying dot. And while we're in top dotting mode, let's top dot these white dots with a little bit of bright copper. And we'll use the 2mm tool. Now I think I'm going to top dot the uppermost dots of these petals with the bright copper as well. And again, using the 0.5mm tool or the opposite end if you need those dots to be smaller. I ended up using the 0.5mm tool for the top dot, and then the two below I used the smaller end of the tool. Alright, now we're going in with the 9.5mm tool to place these peacock pearl dots all the way around on every line. And we're in the 2.5cm to 3.5cm from the rim in that space. The bottom of the alternating swooshes is 4cm from the rim. This is the next brush I'll be using, and this is our next color. Now I'm choosing to do one side of the flower first all the way around, and the tip of that is going to meet at the 2cm from the rim line. Here we're just placing some tiny purple pearl dots at the top of those flowers, and I'm using the small end of the 1mm tool. You could use the 0.5mm tool, whatever tool will work for you in your space. Now I'm using the small end of the tool to walk dots about halfway down these flowers. Time for some top dotting. We're going in with Mississippi mud, and we're using the 2/0 brush. So let's start here, shall we? And I'm going to do one side first. Lovely. And now the other side. Let's do some more titanium white dots, and we'll use the 2.5mm tool for the uppermost dot. Okay, we're just sitting on top of that line there. The 2mm tool. Okay, we're going to place another trio of swooshes along here, and we're starting with our first dot at the 2.5cm line from the rim, and the other two just sitting on the 3cm line from the rim. And we're using the 1mm tool, and then we're going to turn that tool around, use the small end to drag those swooshes down. Starting our brush strokes in Desert Turquoise and using the XDT 2/0 brush. And now for some Whispering Turquoise. Now let's use that 3.5mm tool and create some white pearl top dots here.
Said that you've been hurt one too many times before. Ended up staring in the bathroom mirror, crying on your bedroom floor. Baby, you could.
Okay, let's add some copper swooshes here. We use the 3.5mm tool. And we're going to use the small end of that tool to drag that swoosh down.
I wanna make this forever.
And now we'll bring in some Whispering Turquoise that's been lightened with titanium white. And lastly, we'll put in some Peacock Pearl.
Before, going in circles on a one-way street, run until your feet get sore. Well, I guess you haven't heard. You've been get around no more. Things about to get much better. So I wanna make this forever.
Now that those are done, we're going to run some copper dots up in between them using the 2.5mm tool. Enjoy. While that's drying, let's take this opportunity to wipe off some of those guideline marks. Just a damp, moist microfiber cloth or a baby wipe. Just watch that they don't leave any lint on there. I always keep a lint roller handy for afterwards. I love how nicely these lines are coming off. After this dried, I did touch-ups before varnishing. Okay, it's time to get ready to varnish. So now I'm going to lift my piece up a little bit. I think 3 will be enough. You may have to cut this down, and we will. This piece had several days to dry, so I'm not worried about it not being dry enough. We're using this Liquitex satin gloss, and I quite like it. So we'll get in there and get our first coat on. Okay, we'll just get some around this edge first, and I'll work that to the edges, then I'll put a little bit more in the center, and we'll brush it all out. Get some varnish around the edge, and then we'll do our drawdown. I typically give it between 3 and 4 hours to dry before I put on another coat. And then we'll let this dry, and then we'll take some pictures. Presenting Arizona vibes. Well, that was fun. Thanks for joining me, and I hope to see you at the next one. And remember, keep on dotting.